So again, I need to start out with an apology for the noisy aircon in the background. We are absolutely scorching here in Australia, so there's no way I can record without leaving the aircon running. Unfortunately, it's a very loud aircon. So, moving on from that. In this video, I want to look at this whole story about Maddie wanting to run away and live in the woods, because I found it really fascinating with this newest body cam footage that came out, that the story seemed to change before our very eyes. And I was just curious about what exactly was going on and what the actual story might have been. So I've pulled out a few clips from when Jen was talking about it. I pulled out clips from the best friend talking about it. Also a clip from one of the teachers. And then I want to have a look at the very end at what was said in a press conference, just to try and figure out what exactly is going on, and just to look at the way this story changes over time, and even from people who you would think possibly wouldn't change the story. But I'll explain that as we go along. So let's jump in and listen to the first clip.
Nothing weird. You guys haven't had any recent arguments?
Recently, no. Apparently, on February 2nd, she sent a few messages to a friend stating that she would run away. But it must have been after. From the messages, we must have been arguing, or I must have said something that upset her because she was very upset in her texting with a friend. But
do you guys still have those, or no?
Yeah.
Her cousins are.
Do you guys remember what she said? Did she say she wanted to
The gist
run
of
away?
it was she was mad at her mom and she turned 13 and she was literally
run away to the woods.
Okay,
What she
so
said.
what we could try and do.
So this is the first version that we've been given, that Maddie was mad with Jen. She was upset because things weren't going well between her and Jen, and that she wanted to run away and live in the woods when she turned 13. And we've heard this from numerous sources. So whether it's because this has been reported following this conversation, or whether or not it has come from other sources, that's my big question, especially because even within this interview, the story changes. So we know from listening to Jen's interviews that she claims she was just far too distressed to look at these messages herself on Maddie's phone, so she got her sister Stephanie to do so, and also Stephanie's daughter. So what is being said in this instance is that basically Stephanie told her or showed her this text message that was saying that she wanted to run away and live in the woods. So let's listen and see how this changes within a very short period of time.
They're asking me about the text message where she said she wanted to run away to the woods. Do you remember who she texted that to and what day, so I can show them that? Well, see, when I went to what I thought Tall Goblin, February 2nd, where she said, what did she say? Where she talked about, me acting up and that she don't want to live with me, or that I said something about kicking her out before she turned 18, or when she turned 18. It doesn't say, it doesn't talk about her running away into the woods.
Like what?
Where did she say that? Did she ever say that?
In front of Home Depot? No. background Florida tag for me as well. That one? It'll be 002 8 Alpha Yankee. Florida tag. It'll be a white minivan.
Oh, okay.
Now, I'm just going to butt in here before we get to what Jen says and comment on the interactions that I've seen going on here. So, Stephanie has returned Jen's call, and Jen has said, look, you know, I'm looking for this text message about Maddie wanting to run away and live in the woods. And from what I'm reading in Jen's body language, from the interaction that's occurring, even though I can't hear what Stephanie's saying, it sounds like Stephanie is talking about this same message. And Jen's referring to not being able to find it in a particular location. I looked in this spot. Now, for her to be saying, I looked in that spot, makes me think that Stephanie would be saying, well, you know, I saw it in I saw it somewhere. Not, no, that's not what she said. So you would expect, based on the interactions that we are hearing, even though it's only one-sided, you would expect that Jen would get off the phone call and say, well, yeah, Stephanie said she read this comment and it should be in this location. Now, we've all listened to this audio multiple times now, and we know that's not what occurs. So let's listen and see what she does come out with.
Okay. Okay. I'll let him know.
Apologies
No,
to
that was
modify
it.
that for me.
Okay. So what she had said was to Sage, actually this is Sage's dad that reiterated this to us, was that once she had said she wanted, wouldn't it be fun to go camping in the woods and do a bonfire? So that's what she mentioned about being in the woods, not that she wanted to run away and live in the woods.
That's different.
Yeah, that's not running away.
And then with
So now the story changes. Now, I want to point out, first of all, that Jen was doing the sway. When did we last see her doing that sway? That sway began straight after the question about Maddie's laptop, when they asked if it could be traced. As soon as someone mentioned, well, if it's turned on, it can be traced, Jen began this nervous sway. Now, while she's been finishing this conversation with her sister, she started swaying, she's got off the phone, she's continued swaying, and now the story has completely changed. So now, it's got nothing to do with a text message, apparently. Now, she's saying, well, Sage's dad reiterated to us that she'd once said, wouldn't it be fun to go camping in the woods and have a bonfire? Now, what's really curious about this is that, as far as I know, there's no connection between Sage's dad and Stephanie. It's my understanding from listening to other interviews with Sage and from looking at reports that in fact there had been a conversation between Jen and Sage and Jen and Sage's dad when Maddie went missing. But it's not, there's never been any mention here of any connection between Stephanie and Sage's dad. And of course, let's not forget that the whole point of her ringing Stephanie was because this was a text message that Stephanie had either shown her or relayed to her. So why would she have knowledge of a conversation with Sage's dad? I don't buy it. So I don't know, it's a bit of a Chinese whispers thing going on here. I don't know if on the other end of the phone Stephanie has said, look, they haven't found her in the woods and this is just making you look like a bad mum, So let's just change the story. Or whether Jen herself, because we've seen her body language, she's really pissed off about being made to look bad here. If you go and watch my video where I did a full review of this body cam footage, I've explained it in full. But Jen is not happy about being her own behaviour being highlighted. And that's what this text message does. This text message highlights the fact that she was behaving badly and that there was an issue between her and Maddie, and her body language shows us how resentful she is of that. She's not concerned about her daughter being missing. She's pissed off with her daughter for making her look bad. So, do we think that this is the truth? It seems highly unlikely to me. Especially because the story changes again in the next retelling. So, first of all, it seems highly unlikely for it to have gone from being a text message that Stephanie read to being a conversation that was had with Sage's dad that Stephanie was somehow aware of. It's not something that to me sounds like you could easily get mixed up. So let's listen to the next instance when this whole running away into the woods thing is brought up.
So I kind of get on top of her. Do I remember the actual argument? No. When I went through her text messages back on February 2nd or 3rd, she had expressed to a friend that, I was crazy. I was acting, being nuts.
Almost stuff to say.
Yeah, apparently I don't remember this in this conversation. I remember saying this once, but not in February. But she had said, if she continues to behave this way or not listen, when she turns 18, I'm not going to want to live with her.
Okay.
Or also I would ship her off to her dad's.
Oh.
But I never...
So, while in this particular interview, she doesn't specifically outright say that in those text messages was where Maddie said that she wanted to go live in the woods, she's basically reiterating the circumstances that had led to Maddie saying that she wanted to go live in the woods when she was 13. So she's saying, she said to her friend that I was being crazy, I was nuts. And you can tell she's pissed off about this as all get out. And saying how, when she turns 18 saying that when she turns 18 that I wouldn't want to live with her, or that I would ship her off to her dad's. And of course, Jen is certain that she never said that because she's such a good mother. She would never do such horrible things for her child as to say something like that and upset her child. BS. So, this is all within the context of talking about would Maddie run away? And here she is saying, she skips on, as per usual, to talking about, I looked at these text messages and she accused me of being crazy and nuts and yada yada. And this is the exact same context that the text message about heading off into the woods was brought up, and she even says the same date, 2nd of February. So to me, it makes me think perhaps there really was a text message there where Maddie expressed that she wanted to go live in the woods to get away from her mother. But let's listen to what else is said in other interviews, see if we can figure this thing out.
So this whole living in the woods thing, I have people tromping through the woods right now on horses and ATVs and all sort of things, but has she ever mentioned that before?
Just in that text that I saw.
Just that's the only time you've ever heard of it? Is she outdoorsy at all? Does she like camping?
We used to go hiking.
Okay.
But we haven't done that in a while.
I've got it.
But no, I know, the thing is, I started talking to her about World War III. I was talking about, I'm like, hey, this is going on in Palestine and Israel right now.
Oh, so you're talking to her about the wars.
I was telling her, I was talking to her about just what's happening politically, and I'm like, you know, I don't know what that means for us, but we'll see what happens. But I've talked to her about World War III, so that's what I'm just saying.
How long ago was that? I mean, is that something that might have impacted her?
Yeah, I feel like
okay.
That's why when I read that conversation, I'm like, oh, that's directly related to me talking to her about what's happening in Israel, Palestine, and the potential World War III that might happen from that.
Okay.
And that's why she said she wanted to go live in the woods.
Okay. Got it. All right. No, just wanted to figure out where that might have come from. Maybe help me see if she just wanted to be in the outdoors.
Definitely, the World War III conversation, that's definitely me.
Okay.
That was me.
It's fine. I mean, it's fine.
Okay, so it seems like we're going round in circles here. She's now forgotten this whole part of the narrative about it being a conversation which clearly occurred in the proximity of Sage's dad, because he reminded them that Maddie had said this about the camping in the woods and having a bonfire. But she's completely forgotten all that now, and she's gone back to it being a text message that she saw talking about living in the woods. But now it's got nothing to do with an argument with Maddie or Jen being nuts or anything. No. Apparently now the story is that she'd had a conversation with Maddie about World War III breaking out, and that Maddie had said that she wanted to go live in the woods if that occurred, and that's what this text message is about. So we have a consistent thing occurring here, and that is that the story keeps going back to there having been a text message, and that Maddie had expressed that she wanted to go live in the woods. The other thing that's interesting here is she says that this occurred a few weeks back, or a number of weeks back. Well, that once again, give or take a week, takes us back to around the 2nd of February. So I know that's a 3-week gap, but we know Jen's very good at tweaking things a little bit to suit her needs. So rather than say 3 weeks back, because that would take it back to that time frame, it's easier for her to say a few weeks back. That separates it from this occurrence on the 2nd of February in her mind. But clearly it seems to be, once again, pointing to some sort of almighty blow-up between the two of them on the 2nd of February, at which point Maddie has written this text message and expressed to her friends that she wanted to go live in the woods when she turned 13. I'm thinking, because the story keeps pointing in that direction, that this text message did exist, and that this is the truth of the matter. I'm going to go on now and listen to some comments made by Maddie's best friend. And what's really interesting here is that these comments change. And I'll go through them, and then I'll explain why I believe they've changed.
And when you say she tells you a lot of things, what do you mean?
Like, she'll tell me, like, stuff that's going on with her family, anything really that, like, kind of, like, involves her, like, if, like, to get into a fight, she would go tell me about it on call and stuff. She had never told me about anything about her running away other than her saying if she were to run away, she'd go into the woods and find a place and stay there.
So what she's saying here is very much in keeping with everything else that we've heard. They ask her, you know, as a best friend, what sort of things do you share, you know? I mean, we all know best friends tell each other just about everything. And she actually refers to fights between Maddie and Jen, and that Maddie would talk to her about them. And then from that, she talks about how Maddie said if she were to ever run away, she'd go into the woods and find a place to stay there. So breaking it down, she's basically saying that there was a conversation following an argument between Maddie and Jen, where Maddie expressed that she wanted to go live in the woods. Well, that sounds awfully familiar. That's the original story that we heard in that interview. So, at this point in time, it sounds like Maddie did actually express to her best friend that she wanted to go and live in the woods. She wanted to run away and go live in the woods. Now, she doesn't say here, when she turns 13, but she comes back to this. And the turning 13 comes into play. But definitely here, the fact that in her mind she's made the connection, they've asked her about things that they talk about, and she's made the connection herself between a fight between Maddie and Jen, and Maddie wanting to live in the woods. This is not the result of questioning from detectives. This is her making that connection in her own mind. So let's move on and see what else she said.
Okay. Has she ever mentioned anything to you about wanting to run away?
Other than the woods.
Okay, and tell me about that.
We were at Recharge. We were walking around the bus loop, and she was like, she was talking about a gator, and then she was like, it'd be like so cool to do. And I was like, what? She was like, if we like ran into the woods, like, that trail behind school. I was like, yeah. And she was like, it'd be so cool to like go there and just like build a little house. And I was like, the woods, like with like animals and stuff. And I was like, where are you gonna get this like wood and stuff to build this house? And she was like, I don't know, I'll figure it out. And I thought she was joking and stuff because she kind of like smiled when she did it.
So she's been asked here directly, has Maddie ever spoken about running away? And she says, other than talking about the woods. And so she's been prompted here to explain a bit more. And in this instance, she's saying that this conversation occurred when they were at school and they were walking around an area, and that Maddie had said to her that she wanted to run into the woods and build a little house or something. And in this part of the conversation, she's saying, I thought she was just joking around because she had a bit of a smile on her face. Now, it's curious that she has, at one stage, spoken about how Maddie and Jen have fights and gone on to talking about that she'd want to go and live in the woods as a result of those fights. And then she's referring to this conversation that occurred at school, which still is Maddie talking about wanting to go live in the woods. Now, I'm actually wondering if this is something that Maddie has brought up a few times, because we've had definite references to a text message between Maddie and her best friend, where Maddie says she wants to go live in the woods. But we now have this reference where she says they're walking around the school and Maddie said it. Is it perhaps something that was so much on Maddie's mind that she did mention it in a text message and also discuss it? Or is Sage becoming a little bit muddled here? It would be very daunting to be a 13-year-old being interviewed by detectives. So I'd imagine she was very nervous. She sounds super confident. And I have to say, I think this girl's got a big future ahead of her. But I would imagine that for a 13-year-old to be in this position where they are being interviewed by a detective over their missing friend, that a bit of anxiety is natural. And there may be a bit of confusion during this time. She's at school, she's not at her home, which would be a more comfortable environment. So she hasn't got her parents around her. So it certainly seems possible that there could be a bit of confusion here, or that there are two separate incidences that she's discussing. Now, let's listen and see what else she happens to say.
What do you think happened?
She does have a lot of social media. I think that she was waiting to turn 13 because she had told like, when I turn 13, once I turn 13, I'm gonna leave this house and never come back.
Why 13?
Because I think because she would always brag. Because I said that I can't wait to my birthday, and she was like, "Are you having a birthday party?" I said no, and she was like, "Oh, I get a whole bunch of money, like $500 something dollars."
So here we have very much close to the same story here. She's saying that she refers to Maddie and her social media again, which makes me wonder if there was a conversation online. But a lot of what she's saying here definitely sounds like there was a verbal conversation going on as well. She says that Maddie was waiting to turn 13, and she said that when she did, she was going to leave this house and never come back. And she explains that as that she believed it was because Maddie was expecting to get over $500 for her birthday. So what the connection she's making here is that she believes that Maddie felt that she would have enough money to afford to run away when she got her birthday money. Now, let's be realistic here. I think that Maddie was being a typical teenager and over exaggerating the amount of money that she was going to get for her birthday. It sounds like Maddie had a lot of insecurities, and one of those things with her insecurities was that she seemed to over exaggerate. We've heard a few instances where she said things and it's turned out to be an over exaggeration. And in fact, when Sage talks about Maddie's birthday and she talks about what Maddie had said and the reality, we can see Maddie had definitely talked it up a bit beforehand, and it didn't quite turn out the way that she thought it would. So what I think is actually going on here is that this idea of running away and living in the woods sounds like it was actually a significant thing to Maddie. Now, we can tell that the conversation about her turning 13 and leaving the house and never coming back, that sounds like it was quite recent, like it was just prior to Maddie's birthday, because Sage is making the connection there with Maddie's birthday money. But we know that the text messages that are being referred to are supposedly occurred around the 2nd of February. So I actually think what's going on here is that Maddie has become fixated on this idea of running away into the woods to get away from Jen, and that she has perhaps expressed it in anger during those text messages on the 2nd of February, and perhaps continued to think about it since then and had conversations with Sage over this same thing. Because essentially, the story that we're getting, when we break it down, aside from the odd strange bits that have come out from Jen, at the moment we are getting the main story of Maddie wanting to run away and live in the woods when she turned 13. We're getting variations of it, but at the base of the matter, that is the information that's been given now by Stefan, by Jen, even though she then retracted it, and Jen claims that there's a text message saying that, and that Stephanie had found the text message. So supposedly Stephanie also saw this text message saying she wanted to live in the woods. And we have Sage essentially saying the same thing. Certainly curious. So let's listen and see what else Sage had to say about this.
On the news, you guys had said that when she turned 13, she would go to the woods.
Yeah.
That's not what she said, though.
What'd she say?
She said if World War III to break out, then
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we're aware of that.
Now, we have Sage doing a complete backflip here. She's talked about, initially she's talking about arguments between Maddie and Jen, and Maddie wanting to go live in the woods. Talked about her wanting to leave and never come back when she turns 13. And now she's adopted Jen's story of if war breaks out, she wants to go live in the woods. And I thought that was really curious, and I was trying to wrap my head around it. And it occurred to me, now, this later interview occurred, I think, was definitely after Stefan had been charged for the images. And I believe it may have been, yeah, it was, sorry. So this was after Maddie had been found. So at this point in time, things have changed. This girl's world has just been completely crumbled. Everything that, her reality has just completely changed. And I gather that she's extremely loyal to Maddie. They've been best friends for 4 years. And I think, to me, when I think of the fact that she's a 13-year-old, I suspect that there are things which she felt, for Maddie's sake, she needed to say a different way because she didn't want Maddie to look bad. I suspect that, well, I have no doubt that she would have been at Maddie's memorial. We know that Jen was there, we know that Tyler was there. I think we can be pretty confident from listening to these interviews that Sage's parents would not have let her go to the memorial service or the funeral without them there with her. And I strongly suspect that her dad would have been there with her. So I actually think that what has occurred here is a conversation between Jen and Sage's dad, where this whole World War III thing has been brought up. And Sage has felt that she must have got the information wrong because this is what the adults are saying. When you're 13 and you hear adults saying something that basically refutes what you thought was the truth, then you may well adopt that as your own truth. I'm not sure if I'm explaining this very well, but basically I believe that Sage's interpretation of what was going on has been influenced by Jen. I don't think that she is intentionally lying here. I think that what has gone on in her head is that she has heard this conversation between the adults about the World War III thing and decided that she must have misinterpreted because when you are 13, you believe that adults know everything. Adults are pretty much infallible. So if this is what the adults are saying, this must be the truth of the situation. So she's putting aside what she had previously known. This conversation about Maddie saying she wanted to go live in the woods. She wanted to leave the house and never come back. She wanted to wait till her birthday and get the $500 and run away. She's putting all that aside and translating it into Jen's story of going and living in the woods. Not because she wanted to run away and get away from Jen, but because she wanted to get away from World War III. Right from the get-go, I found Jen's story about World War III to be so unbelievable. And the fact that it came in as an evolution from various versions of the original story made me think that, yeah, this is just Jen changing the story for one reason. And what's that one reason? We've seen this with several stories from Jen, where she's basically changed the story so that it didn't make her look bad. It goes back to the same as when her original story was, I sent them upstairs because I needed a good night's sleep. My sleep was out of whack. She then changed that story to, I realised I forgot my meds. She didn't say that in the early interviews. The early interviews, it was all because she just wanted a good night's sleep, because her sleep patterns were out of whack from work. She later introduced the meds story, and then further down the track, she basically put it onto Stefan and Maddie. Oh, they wanted to have sleepovers, and I didn't like the idea, but I just allowed it because they were pushing so much about it. So she pretty much discarded the whole meds story for a while there and introduced the notion that it became acceptable for them to sleep together because they pushed for sleepovers. And what she's done here with the living in the woods thing is the same. She's gone from Maddie doing a text message because she was angry with Jen about wanting to go live in the woods. That text message has conveniently vanished, and then the story changes to Maddie wanted to go live in the woods because she was afraid of World War III. So it seems like the pattern here is that Jen's story, we know how often her story changes, how many lies she says, and it seems the story has evolved to make Jen look less guilty, so that Jen doesn't look like the bad mum, because we know she has worked so hard through all these interviews to give the impression of being the perfect mother. And I think that this has then been projected onto Sage at Maddie's funeral, and like I said, when you're 13, you think adults are right and adults know everything. So if you hear the adults saying this is what it was about, you're going to take that on board. You're going to think, well, okay, I was wrong. These are adults, they know the truth. And I think that's why, at this point in time, she's gone to the story of if war broke out. Now, I'm going to play a section of one of the teacher interviews to see what they said. And this, of course, is going back in time again to the 27th of February. So this is before this interview that Sage did here. This is around the time when Sage was still saying that Maddie had said she wanted to go live in the woods if she ran away, essentially.
Anything?
Unfortunately, I don't think I have any more information that you guys have,
Okay.
because a student did come up to me and tell me that she was talking with friends about wanting to live in the woods,
Okay.
like after she turned 13, but I think you guys already have all that.
Yeah.
So here you have him relaying that Maddie had expressed to friends that she wanted to go live in the woods after she turned 13. Now, there's no explanation here of why, but can we just acknowledge here that if Maddie was so afraid of World War III and wanting to move into the woods if World War III broke out, well, she wasn't going to expect World War III to break out on her 13th birthday, was she? So it seems to me that definitely the World War III story is just a load of BS, and that the whole story of wanting to run away and live in the woods once she turned 13 because of her relationship with her mother seems to be the most likely story. This seems to be what perhaps has been said. And if we go back to the very beginning, this all came from a conversation about a text message or a message that Maddie had sent to her friend saying just that she wanted to go and live in the woods once she turned 13. This was supposedly around the time that she'd had a fight with Jen. Now, I remembered that there was a discussion of this in the first press conference, and I wanted to go back and listen to what exactly was said in that press conference. So let's listen to that, and then I'll wrap it up with a few observations.
We were able to access Madeline's phone, and there is information on the phone that indicated that she told people when she turned 13, which was on February 22nd, she actually wanted to go live in the woods. So that was in her phone. And
now, I know that when it comes to these sorts of investigations, that occasionally police will put out misinformation deliberately if it will help them with their case. But it seems to me quite interesting that he is saying exactly what we've been hearing from the very beginning. He says we were able to get hold of her phone and the information on her phone. That means after they collected Maddie's phone on the 27th, they've done an extraction from that phone. And that text message, it appears that they have found that text message, and Maddie did actually express in a message on her phone that she wanted to go live in the woods when she turned 13. I believe that in terms of what we know with the investigation, I don't believe that there would have been any benefit in putting this out if it was misinformation. At this point in time, they were still speculating. They hadn't seen Stefan's phone yet. They were still speculating that maybe an abduction had occurred. In this press conference, they relayed the story that Stefan and Jen had given them about Maddie being dropped off, and that she may have been seen on security cameras by the church, and all that story is what was relayed in this press conference. So if they were following a lead where they believed that she had been abducted, what's the benefit in also sharing this story about a text message on the phone? That's very, very specific information. And not only that, but it is definitely confirming what we've heard from Jen and what we heard from Sage originally. So I believe, and I also went through and looked at various reports that were written around the time, and the reports refer to the same thing. There's no actual information regarding extractions from Maddie's phone. None of that has been released, so the only messages that have been released from Maddie's phone is the pregnancy coins. Other than that, nothing else has been released. But I find it really interesting that they have specifically said this information was retrieved from her phone. They could have said, we've been told from her friends that this is what they said, but they didn't. So my takeaway from all this is that the truth of the matter is that Maddie did say to her friends that she wanted to go and live in the woods. She wanted to get away from her horrible home life and live in the woods, and for some reason she felt that turning 13 would have meant she was mature enough and old enough to do so, and it sounds like Sage believed that there was also the financial incentive that she could afford to do so because she was expecting a lot of birthday money. I think the change in the narrative has occurred as a direct result of Jen's narcissism. In that first video, you can see how angry she is at Maddie that this information is coming out, because it makes Jen look like a bit of an ogre. Makes her look like the bad potato, the rotten potato, which she probably is. So Jen's done what Jen does best and tweaked the narrative so that none of it reflects badly on Jen. So in her mind, she obviously hasn't thought about the fact that probably scaring a 13-year-old with the talk of World War III isn't actually such a great thing to do. It's deflecting from her. It's not highlighting the fact that she was behaving badly. She was in a huge fight with Maddie, and this was the consequence. Now it makes it look like, oh, Maddie just wanted to do that because she was afraid of World War III. Look the other way, folks. Don't look at me. I'm the perfect mother. I would never have arguments or be so horrible to my daughter that she would want to go and live in the woods. So my takeaway from listening to all this is that, yeah, Maddie did want to go live in the woods, not because she was afraid of World War III. It wasn't something that she planned to do if World War III broke out. No, this was something that she considered to be a possibility once she turned 13 to escape her dreadful home life. And that is so heartbreaking. To think at the age of 13 that you would be prepared to go live in the woods where there'd be all sorts of animals and critters, and where you'd be away from your home comforts, where that would be preferable to being in your own home. I'm going to finish on that because I think that's pretty powerful when you look at it that way. You know, my heart breaks for poor Maddie. The things that she went through. Jen was not a good parent. And we know Stinky should never have been given any access to her, and he made her life a living hell. The torture that this poor child went through is just horrible. So, I'm going to stop there. Thanks for listening. If you are new to my channel, please subscribe. Also, please hit the like button and please leave a comment below. These are the things that are going to help me to grow my channel, and I'm really keen to try and hit my next goal of 4,000 subscribers, and you can help me do that by subscribing if you're new, by hitting like, by leaving a comment. Now I will apologise in advance, you guys. I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but it's out of my control when YouTube turn my comments off. It's not me doing it, it's YouTube doing it. And yes, I have made contact with the support team about this. I've done everything I can think of to try and sort this problem out. It keeps recurring. I will just say, when the comments get turned off, I do turn them back on again. So if the comments are turned off and you are eager to leave comments, please do come back and leave comments. And it certainly helps, because of course the catch-22 with comments being turned off is that YouTube looks at my video and says, well, this video is not getting a lot of comments, or this video is getting no comments, and it doesn't boost it in the algorithm, which means that my videos just sit there and they flounder. So please, if the comments are on, please do leave a comment, even if it's just putting a love heart in there for Maddie. It helps my channel and it helps me get Maddie's story out to more people. So on that note, thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one.
I've been